Welcome to the Copeland Coaching Podcast, where it's all about turning your job search into a slam dunk. Your host is Angela Copeland.
Welcome to the Copeland Coaching Podcast. I'm your host, Angela Copeland. Live on the phone with me today, I have Brenda Bernstein from Madison, Wisconsin. Brenda, founder and senior editor at The Essay Expert and best-selling author of How to Write a Killer LinkedIn Profile, is an award-winning businesswoman and resume writer. Her book has been featured in Fortune and Forbes and is a top-ranked business writing skills book on Amazon, outselling books by the Harvard Business Review. She also has a new edition actually coming out soon. Brenda, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you.
It's so exciting to talk to you. I mentioned to you that, before we started that, LinkedIn is such an important topic, and I don't think, we've ever covered it on the podcast. So I'm really excited to get your perspective today, specifically on LinkedIn.
All right. Well, I look forward to speaking with you, Angela.
Great. Well, so I mentioned that you have a book, How to Write a Killer LinkedIn Profile, where you give advice for people who are kind of struggling, with LinkedIn. I work directly one-on-one with clients who are looking for a job actively, and one of the questions they often ask me is, do I really need to have a LinkedIn profile? What's your perspective on that?
I think every job seeker, unless they're looking for, a job in a fast food restaurant, a lower level job in a fast food restaurant, maybe some professions like nurses and teachers might not be as important. But for almost all of the professional world, LinkedIn is the place to be. And there are two reasons for that. Number one, the employers and the recruiters are looking at LinkedIn and actually researching candidates on LinkedIn to see who they might pick. Mm-hmm. So headhunters will contact you if you're on LinkedIn. And statistics, of course, speak pretty loudly. And the last statistic I have is that over 97% of staffing professionals use LinkedIn as a recruiting tool. So you definitely want to be on there. And you don't want to just be on there. You want to actually look good, because another statistic is that 70% of staffing professionals have decided not to hire a candidate based on what they've found on LinkedIn.
Wow.
But a similar percentage have hired employees based on what they see on LinkedIn. So whether or not someone's going to find you on LinkedIn, let's say you send your resume in somewhere, the first thing that company is going to do is they are going to look at your LinkedIn profile. So, I was talking to someone yesterday who's in nonprofit, or he works at a foundation in fundraising. Now, they might not find her. They might not have recruiters out there looking for her on LinkedIn. They may or may not. But that when she sends in her resume, they're going to look and see what does she have on her LinkedIn profile.
No, that's great advice. And 97% is huge. I've had clients ask me, do recruiters really find people on LinkedIn? And I've been contacted myself by recruiters many times through LinkedIn, and I was so glad to be there. So I think it's, it's an easy, free resource that's available. I feel like it's essential to a job search today.
Yes, and if you're deciding between which social media platform to use as a job seeker, it's LinkedIn. That is the front runner by a huge margin in terms of hires that are sourced from social media. 73% of hires sourced from social media or sourced from LinkedIn.
Oh, that's
so
interesting.
It's a much lower percentage on Facebook. It's about 20% on Facebook and 7% on Twitter. So if you're going to focus your energies on a social media platform in your job search, focus them on LinkedIn.
Okay. And you mentioned, that although a recruiter may not find you on LinkedIn originally, that once they get your resume, they look you up on LinkedIn. And that kind of actually brings a question that I have occasionally, which is some of my clients will actually type their LinkedIn URL on their resume, and others will leave it off. Do you have a recommendation on what's better, to put it on or to take it off?
Put it on.
Put it on?
It's
okay.
It's standard now to put a LinkedIn profile URL on a resume.
Okay.
And you want to customize that URL so it doesn't have a bunch of slashes and letters and numbers at the end of it.
Okay. That's great. Great advice.
And instructions on how to do that are in my book. So if anyone has questions about any of this, all the statistics are in the introduction to my book, and more. Instructions on how to change your URL, those are in my book too. So if you have any questions as I'm going along, like, oh, you said that, but I don't know how to do it. How do I do that? Then you'll find the answers in how to write a killer LinkedIn profile.
No, I think that's such great advice. I've talked to people before who hire experts to help them write their LinkedIn profile. But the thing is, it's so easy that like a simple resource like your book can guide someone easily to go in and, really perfect their own profile. So it's great that they have such a resource like your book to do that.
Yeah, thank you. And for a lot of people, that's really the best way to do it. If you are able to write about yourself and feel comfortable doing that, and if you're a do-it-yourselfer and like to read books and apply what you learn, it's a great way to do it. And you don't need a professional writer necessarily.
Yeah, I love that, because the thing is, too, is that exactly, it's the same with your resume. The more involved that you can be, the better, the more it speaks to you and the more that you know what it says. When I sit down with clients, occasionally they'll apologize for their resume and they'll say, well, that's inaccurate or that's not right. And the only people I've had that happen with are those who've hired someone to help them and have been very hands-off.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the first things that a recruiter will see or someone in your network when they look at your LinkedIn profile is really your headline. And I just was wondering if you could give us some tips on effective ways to write a LinkedIn headline.
Well, there are two things to consider in the headline. And first, you want to think about what's my purpose on LinkedIn. So if your purpose is to be found on LinkedIn, then your first priority is going to be to have the right keywords in your headline so that when someone does a search, they find you. You come up in the search. If you're someone who doesn't expect to be found on LinkedIn, like the person I mentioned before who works for a foundation, and that's not probably a job that people be finding her on LinkedIn, though it's possible, she might want to concentrate on having more of a value statement in the headline.
Okay.
Not that you wouldn't want to have keywords. Keywords are great for everyone, but if you want to be found, they're more important than if you don't want people to find you there and you just want them to be impressed when they come and they see your profile.
So what would be a...
So you want to think about, what's your unique selling proposition? That's a marketing term, your USP. What do you offer, and how can you express that in your headline? And then, so that's if you just want to kind of put yourself out there and what you offer. If you're looking to get keywords and be found, then you're going to put more of those. You definitely want to have your job title. You usually do not need to have the place that you work. Like if it says program manager at Johnson & Johnson or like anything, even if it's a big, impressive name, no one is going to be searching, or almost no one's going to be searching for Johnson & Johnson. So what's more important than the name of the company in that spot is going to be, consumer packaged goods or something, something that people might be looking for as a keyword.
Oh, that's great. That's a great example. What about, you mentioned also the idea of the value proposition. I mean, what would be an example of a headline, when keywords were a little less important?
This is something on a resume too. Do you have a tagline that you use on your resume, leading teams to performance and profitability, companies to profitability, or what is it that you offer? And it's different for everybody.
That totally makes sense. Mm-hmm.
For me, a value proposition might be, bringing, what would it be? What would my value proposition be? Because I don't have one in my headline because I want people to find me, right? I emphasize keywords.
Sure.
But I might look at like my company vision or value proposition. Like I'm I support people, I empower people to move their careers to the next level. Like
Okay.
that might be something that I put if I were looking at a value headline. But I wouldn't write empowering, I might put empowering executives to move their careers to the next level. Like
Okay.
that would be a value proposition.
No, that's great.
But how many keywords are in there? Executive, yes. But where's resume? Where's LinkedIn profile? So someone who's looking for a LinkedIn profile writer, that headline would not help me.
Right. That makes sense.
Right? So as much as it might sound really good, that's not what I've chosen to put into my headline.
Okay. And what does your headline say?
Well,
I don't mean to catch you off guard. Sorry.
Profile. I know, you're making me think on my feet here. It says essay and resume writer, executive resumes, personal statements, LinkedIn profiles, and web copy.
Okay. That makes sense. That's great.
And these are things that I do. And I might change that sometimes if I'm wanting to emphasize a particular type of service that I want people to find me for.
Mm-hmm.
So personal statements I might take off when admission season is not hot, which it is right now. There are a lot of people looking for someone to help with a personal statement to get into college or law school right now, and that's something I do, so I have it there. Once, in a couple of months, I might take that out and put more resume and LinkedIn profile. I might even double up on those keywords without making it sound like it's trying too hard.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to just stack a zillion keywords, and that's something that some people do. I've seen in summary statements and other sections where people will just put a bunch of keywords, and you can tell that they're only doing that to be found. And to me, that's a way to turn people off. So make sure that the headline sounds reasonable, and there are ways to repeat words without making it sound too much like you're repeating words. Like I could put LinkedIn profiles and I could write LinkedIn ebook.
Okay.
And that wouldn't shout out at people like, oh, she's keyword stacking.
Okay.
Author of best-selling book on LinkedIn.
Sure. No, that totally makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, that's great advice. So when it comes to photos, that's the other thing that people really, I think, kind of look at. Can you give us some best practices for what should we have in our photos? What should we not have in our photos?
I now have a photo that I'm proud of, so I'm happy to say that. It took me a while. I did get a really great headshot for my LinkedIn profile photo. I really like, for most professionals, something really straightforward with some personality that shows the close-up head, maybe up to the shoulder shot with a plain background, and if you can invest some money there, it's going to make a difference. Earlier you said, well, the first thing they see is your headline. No, the first thing they see is your photo.
Yeah, that's
true. Because
true.
that's where, as human beings, that's where our eyes are drawn. So your photo makes an impact. You are going to, you do want a photo. Some people think, oh, well, I look old, I look this or that, and I'd say get a great photo that brings out your youthful side. Because if you don't have a photo, I always say it's like going to a networking event with a bag over your head. No one's why would you do that? And if you also think just about how we are as humans, if I look at the same profile, exactly the same profile, next to each other, one has a photo and one doesn't have a photo, I'm going to want to talk to the one with the photo.
Right.
If I'm choosing one person to reach out to, it's going to be the one with the photo, and it's just human. So you do need a photo. I worked with someone who does something called branded photography, which I think is really great. Mm-hmm. Anyone in Cleveland who's listening, I really recommend my photographer, Michael Cavada. Or Pittsburgh, if you're in that area.
Uh-huh.
So what he does is he asks you to come up with 3 words that describe you,
mm-hmm.
Your 3 top words, and then the whole session is based upon those 3 words. So he's actually looking for that, and you're looking, when you look at all the zillions of shots that come out, you're looking for the one that captures those 3 aspects of yourself the best.
Oh, that's great.
Which I think is really a cool way to do it. Yeah.
Oh, that's
But
excellent.
if you're looking, I would just look up branded photography and, look at people's samples and see what you get. But it's definitely worth it to invest something in a photo. I think it's made a difference in how people respond to my marketing communications.
No, I totally agree. I have professional photos that I use on, LinkedIn and other social media as well, and I think it really does make a big difference. And, it is a little bit of an investment up front, but you can use them for a few years as long as they don't become terribly outdated.
Yes.
I think, that outdated photos that are very obviously outdated is one thing I definitely recommend, that my clients stay away from. As well as, sometimes you'll see those photos where the person is really tiny and it's a picture, but you can't really see who it is. That one's tough. So
I've seen some that are well done that have like a company logo in the background, or like, they're standing in front of their company sign, something like that. If you're a real estate person, maybe you have a sold sign in a house.
Mm-hmm.
So you can, if you're in a profession that warrants it, then you can get a little bit creative with the photo. If you're a musician and you have a LinkedIn profile, maybe you capture that in your photo. But for most of us, keep it really simple. Women don't wear patterns in your
Mm-hmm.
photo. It doesn't speak to your being a real professional. Like, go for solid colors and simple jewelry and that sort of thing, because you want to be drawing attention to your face and your personality, not to whatever you're wearing.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree. I think, too, it's important to take a photo just by yourself. I've seen
Yes.
photos that people have taken with their spouse or at a party with a friend. And,
No, you can have those on Facebook.
Right. I also once saw someone who their LinkedIn photo was themselves on their wedding day in a wedding dress, and they have a professional job. And so I think, again, it's like really putting forward what you want to represent you in the workplace, not in a social setting.
Yeah. Now, if you're a wedding planner and you're looking to do event planning and you have a great, gorgeous shot from your wedding, then maybe that's appropriate. And I actually had a client who was in that situation. So it was more of a headshot,
Mm-hmm.
but she looked gorgeous and glowing. And, it was a sort of borderline. Like, it was professional enough. And she just looked so great in that headshot. And that was fine for her.
Oh, that's great. Yeah,
She also wasn't necessarily looking, but it could have actually gotten her an office job. Like, it wasn't immediately apparent that that's what it was. But, so everything is there. Everything has context. All the decisions that you make for how you approach the LinkedIn profile, you always need to know what your goal is. Who are you targeting before you make the decisions? Because it can be different. There's no absolute rule for anyone.
No, absolutely. I totally agree. And your example of the wedding planner who's using a wedding-related photo totally makes sense. I think it depends a lot on the context. So another thing I wanted to ask you about is the number of connections. I encourage my clients to increase their connection numbers, and this can sometimes create a little bit of anxiety for them because they have to start sort of reaching out to their contacts. But can you talk about, you mentioned in your book actually that having less than 500 connections is a mistake. Can you talk about why that is?
Well, the first reason is that you just don't look like you're connected.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, I think, one attribute that, at least for a lot of professions, is important. Especially if you're in sales or you want to be an executive level anything, it's important that you have connections.
Mm-hmm.
So if you show up with 137 connections in your network, that would be a negative for most companies looking for someone for that sort of position. And the other reason is the more connections you have, and I'm not saying just accept every single connection willy-nilly. There are a lot of low-quality connections, and I'm not saying to make those, but the more connections you have that are significant connections, they're for real, you're going to have access to see other people's when you do searches.
Mm-hmm.
That's really important. If you have a small network, when you do a search, your results are going to be much more limited because you're going to see your first-level connections and second-level connections. You will not be able to view, and second-level means the connections of your connections.
Mm-hmm.
So you're not going to be able to view people's profiles if there are third-degree connections.
Mm-hmm.
That means the friends of your friends, right?
Right.
The third level. So you really damage your ability to have any kind of reach on LinkedIn, and people won't see you.
Mm-hmm.
It works both ways. So when other people are doing searches, they're going to see their first level, second level connections. If you even come up in their search, they're not going to be able to click and see you. Mm-hmm. Now, I also have tricks. There's some tricks sometimes where you can actually view people who come up as not viewable.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another reason to check my ebook out, because you will be able to get a little more viewability,
mm-hmm.
at least from your end,
right,
using a couple of the tricks that are out there. But there are some people who there's absolutely no way you're ever going to be able to see them or contact them
mm-hmm.
unless you're a first or second degree connection with them.
Yeah, and I think especially for like job seekers, the place where LinkedIn becomes so valuable is that often, if there's someone who's a second degree connection to you, who is perhaps the hiring manager or a recruiter at the company where you'd like to work, reaching out to them on LinkedIn allows you to really be sure that they've seen your resume, they know that you exist, because when you apply online, many times they don't really get a chance to see your resume as actively. And, when you limit those connections, like you said, you have less access to the second degree connections if you have fewer first degree connections.
Right. Yeah, and you want to be able to connect with people and set up telephone appointments and pick their brains and, really reach out to people. And you also want, if you share anything on LinkedIn, you want it for other people to be able to see it. And the fewer connections you have, the fewer people are going to see what you share.
Right, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, that's great advice. So earlier we talked a little bit about keywords as it applied to headlines. But can you talk a little bit about what keywords are and how we might use them throughout our LinkedIn profiles?
Well, keywords, it's the same, if you're when you do a Google search, right? You put in some words that you're searching for. Those are keywords. So the websites that come up are the ones that have those keywords.
Mm-hmm.
So on LinkedIn, it's really the same thing, but you're the website, so you're putting in the words that you think people are going to be searching for.
Right.
So if you're used program manager earlier, if you want to be found for a job as a program manager, then you got to put program manager in your headline, and there are other places to put them as well, including your job titles, and pretty much everywhere in your profile, your summary section, your skills and interests section, any other special sections. I mean, the more times your keywords show up in a natural way, the better.
Mm-hmm.
But program manager, if you think about it, is not very descriptive. And if someone searches for program manager, then about 12 zillion people are going to show up. So you want to put also your industry, or if you have any specialties. If you're a senior program manager, you want to have senior. If you're in IT, you've got to have IT. If you do ERP, you've got to have ERP there. So you need to, and one way to find out what those keywords are just to look at job descriptions.
Mm-hmm.
One really good way, look at the job descriptions for jobs that you're applying for or you would want to apply for, and see what words keep popping up over and over and over and over again. And those are the words in the job titles, for one thing. So, if maybe you're a program manager and you're a project manager, and you need to put both of those into your headline or use both of those throughout your profile. Because there are definitely some jobs where different companies call them different things. And so you want to look at that. What is the job title that I'm really targeting here? Maybe it's multiple job titles. You want to hit those in your LinkedIn profile. And then also the skills, the program areas, the industry, whether it's automotive or healthcare, or we mentioned CPG before. You want to have all of that also in you use all of those as your keywords and just repeat them.
Okay. Yeah, that totally makes sense, because I think you're really trying to be sure that you come up when someone searches, on LinkedIn. Mm-hmm.
When someone does a search and using the advanced search function, and this is something that everyone can do, it's not limited to recruiters or people with paid premium packages or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
So anyone on LinkedIn can do an advanced search, at least searching on some fields, and one of the things they can search for is keywords. So when they put in those keywords, LinkedIn goes and they search the headlines, they search the job titles, they search the summary, they search the special sections, they search pretty much everywhere. So the more times they come up, the better chance you have of being at the top of the search results. Now, recruiters might do that. They also search in the skills.
Okay.
So if you're a job seeker and you want recruiters to find you, use the skills section. Get endorsements for your skills, because the recruiters have a different type of LinkedIn package where they can search who has these skills and who has the most endorsements for these skills.
Wow, that's interesting. So the endorsements are kind of like when people give you essentially like a thumbs up that you're really good at a particular thing. And
Yep.
Yeah.
And they don't have to know you from a hole in the wall to do it. And so you think, for a long people were poo-pooing the skills section because, oh, well, who's going to trust that? Anyone can just click on the thing. They don't have to really know you. They don't have to have worked with you and all this stuff. But as of now, it's a big section that recruiters search. And if you have enough people endorsing you for something, the chances are it's for real.
Mm-hmm.
If you have 99 people plus who've endorsed you for a skill, it's hard to get that without a lot of those being legitimate.
Right. Right. You have to be known for that skill.
Yeah. So don't ignore that section.
So similar to endorsements, there's also a recommendation section where someone can actually write you kind of a written recommendation where they, maybe they say, Brenda, helped me with my LinkedIn profile, and they kind of explain why they endorse you, why they would recommend you. In your mind, are those also important? And, how important are they?
I think they are. Because, again, the skills, it doesn't tell you all that much. I mean, if you have a ton of endorsements, yes, it tells you something, but the recommendations really show that people like you enough that they're willing to put some time and energy into writing something for you.
Mm-hmm.
And they get to really say something more about who you are as a human being. So I would definitely recommend getting recommendations in addition to endorsements. And for us regular human beings who don't have premium profiles, especially, I trust the recommendations more than I trust those skills.
Right. I totally agree with you. And it's really nice to be able to get, hear from someone else's words why they, recommend you.
Absolutely. And, when I'm looking for a service professional, and, some people listening here might not be job seekers, they might be freelancers or consultants or anything like that, the people who are looking for, I've looked for other writers on LinkedIn. I've looked for people who can speak Spanish. I've looked, the different things that I've looked for on LinkedIn, and I read the recommendations. I've looked for an accountant.
Mm-hmm.
So I read the recommendations. And if someone doesn't have any recommendations on LinkedIn, I probably am not going to hire them.
Right. Yeah, that totally makes sense. I completely agree. So when I hear that, what I hear is, that would be viewed kind of as a mistake, not reaching out and asking for recommendations. Are there any other mistakes in particular that you think are big mistakes that a lot of people are making?
I think we've covered a lot of them.
Okay.
Not having the connections, not writing a summary statement
Mm-hmm.
at all. just leaving that blank, or copying your resume summary into the LinkedIn summary and calling it done, because people can spot that from a mile away.
Right.
That you've done that. Like, take the time to actually present yourself. I personally don't, not that it's horrible, but I don't like just seeing your resume copied into your LinkedIn profile. Like, take this opportunity to say things just a little bit differently.
Mm-hmm.
Also, if you are going to do that, or no matter what, make sure that you don't reveal confidential information on your LinkedIn profile.
I totally agree.
Something that's appropriate to put in your resume that's sent privately might not be appropriate to put in your LinkedIn profile.
Yes, because it's, viewed by everyone, essentially, and you do want to be very conscious of what's there. I think you're right, too, though. Your LinkedIn profile can, reflect slightly different or sometimes even more information than your resume, sometimes because there are some interesting new features I've noticed over the past, few years that LinkedIn has added, like the ability to add projects or kind of other things that you're working on that you might not have a spot for on your resume.
Yeah, exactly. And you have 2,000 characters to use up for every one of your experience sections.
Wow.
every one of your jobs. You
Right.
have 2,000 characters in the summary, and you have 2,000 characters for each of your jobs. So you might not use all of that. I very often, when I'm writing for clients, will use close to that 2,000 characters in the summary, because there's so many opportunities to give background and context and what's this person's, what do they have that's unique that they offer, what are a few of their top accomplishments, and then have some keywords in there as well. And sometimes you just add in a skills section and put it right there because it's valuable for the keyword searches. So it's very easy to get to 2,000 characters when you try to do all that in the summary.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing, and I would have you check out my profile or my book. You can actually have your profile look a little bit designed, not a lot, but you can there's some stars and arrows and check marks that you can use. You can use all caps as a header. You can actually make your profile jump out a little bit. You can do that with your headline. You can do that with your summary and your job titles. So I would recommend playing around with that a little bit. It does make a difference in how you're perceived when people start reading.
That's great advice. And I think, if someone hasn't used a star or one of those other characters before, do you typically kind of go into your character map on your computer and copy and paste them, or where do you grab those stars from?
That's a good place to do it. There are some other places. Again, it's in my book.
Okay.
And you can also, if you see something that you like on someone else's profile, you can just copy and paste it.
That's true. Absolutely. There's nothing wrong with sort of using someone else as a sample.
No, that works really well. And then you don't have to do the trial and error. Will this work on LinkedIn? You know it works.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yep.
Well, this has been really helpful. Is there any other advice that you'd like to share with our listeners today? I feel like we've covered quite a few things.
We have. I would say, one thing is if you can possibly share and write and get your articles up on LinkedIn Publisher, do that. That's one thing. Another new feature is the background. So if you don't have a background on your profile, go ahead and set up a nice background. Maybe you need to hire someone to do that. I did. No, I hired someone to create a little background for me on my profile, and I really like it. You could also use the ones that LinkedIn has, sort of their stock images, and that's probably okay, at least for now, until everyone starts doing that, and then it might get boring.
Right.
But use the new features and keep up on the new things that are happening. It's hard because LinkedIn doesn't send out little notices most of the time. Every once in a while they'll send something out, but I miss things, so I can't, and I'm like always looking for them.
Mm-hmm.
So subscribe to something so that you know what the next changes are, or the most recent changes are. I have a blog. I have one blog that I just write about I write about personal growth and transformation, and sometimes I write about LinkedIn, and it's kind of mixed up. People like it. You get to know me as a human being in addition to just like telling you what to do on LinkedIn and resumes. But I also have lists that are just for LinkedIn, and right now it's free to sign up for those. So you can, go to my blog. It's theessayexpert.com/blog, and check out some of my lists, because you'll know that if there's something that you should know that's new on LinkedIn, I'm going to be announcing that. Mm-hmm. So that's one thing to do.
Okay, that's great.
And I want just a final point, which is you have a LinkedIn profile. Don't just sit there and expect your LinkedIn profile to do something for you. Maybe you will get contacted by recruiters, but really you need to be reaching out, making phone calls, and arranging coffee dates, because that's really how to use LinkedIn as a jumping off point rather than just the be-all and end-all.
Oh, I totally agree. So you mentioned the URL for your blog. Can you tell us, if listeners are interested to reach out to you for consulting services, or if they're interested to purchase your book, where should they go? What's the best place to start?
You can start at theessayexpert.com, and it's TheEssayExpert. If you want the Amazon version of my book, or the Kindle version of my book, then you would get that on Amazon. How to Write a Killer LinkedIn Profile. And I also have 2 resume writing books, How to Write a Winning Resume and How to Write a Stellar Executive Resume.
Great.
And then if you go to my site, you can actually get a free excerpt of my book if you sign up for one of my e-lists. And then you can purchase the book in PDF from my site if you prefer just to get a PDF.
Oh, that's great. Well, excellent. Brenda, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Angela.
This discussion's been very helpful, and thanks everyone for listening. Tune in next week for another edition of the Copeland Coaching Podcast. And if you've enjoyed the program today, please be sure to subscribe on iTunes or Stitcher to be sure that you never miss an episode.
Thank you for listening to the Copeland Coaching Podcast today with your host, Angela Copeland. Tune in next time to get more great tips on turning your job search into a slam dunk.